The talks are likely to prove tough.
All of the G7 states have either been the victims of terrorist attacks or have had potential terrorist attacks foiled over the last 6 months. The United States, the UK and Japan, well, journalists from those countries have been the victims of those gruesome Islamic State videos. They've been beheaded on those and published online. In France, the Charlie Hebdo attacks, the attacks on these satirical magazine officers, and then another attack just after on a kosher grocery left scores dead in Paris. The German police say that they foiled a potential terror attack with links to Al-Qaeda in April of this year, and also just in March, Canadian authorities say they stopped a terror attack in Toronto as well. In the case of Italy, well, they've been bearing the brunt of a wave of people fleeing from these organizations, these terror organizations in North Africa and Syria, crossing the Mediterranean and arriving on their shores. It's a problem that is really of their own making in some ways. These leaders are the same ones that signed off on bombing campaigns, or approved bombing campaigns at least, against Iraq, Libya, Afghanistan, Syria, Yemen, destabilizing huge regions. Well, that's prompted counter-terrorism figures to say that Russia's help is needed if we're to have a comprehensive global strategy of how to fight against Islamic extremist terrorism. Well, the problem there is, of course, that it was these G7 leaders that kicked Russia out of the group last year. That leaves them having to deal with their need for Russia, but also their own current animosity towards the Kremlin right now.
So, the G7 second day might be less optimistic than Sunday, which saw all the leaders enjoy the relaxed atmosphere with no talks of disagreements. Well, nearby, though, German security forces have been doing their best to make sure that the VIP guests have a pleasant stay.
Panning to the perimeter fences. Panning to the perimeter fence now.
Well, the main aim of this impenetrable wall of security is to keep protesters far from the summit venue. Well, let's go over to RT's Harry Fear for more on that. Hi, Harry. Good to see you just there. Now, Harry, it seems like the protesters, they don't have a chance to get the leaders' attention directly.
Wir lassen uns das nicht nehmen.
Indeed, this weekend has seen thousands take to the streets of this beautiful Bavarian alpine resort town of Garmisch, and really a remarkable police presence around these towns at the base of the Summit Valley. Tens of thousands of police, heavily armoured, readied for a riot, really escorting protesters around, marching them in controlled columns. Demonstrators, therefore, marching side by side with pepper spray canisters, batons, and really a militarized-looking police force we've seen over the last few days. But according to Donald Tusk, the president of the European Council, these protests that we've seen are really a mark of the wonderful measure of flourishing democracy in G7 countries. Listen to this.
People can demonstrate, can think what they want, can say what they want, and even look like they want.
Of these officials up the valley that it's willful ignorance or willful blindness, who knows, about how these protests have been managed. But certainly even before the summit began, the organisers of the Stop G7 Almo protest and the camp here, they were accusing German authorities of not properly cooperating and really fully facilitating full, proper, peaceful, democratic protests here. And what are these protests activists against, excuse me? Well, they're against the G7. They see it as an unrepresentative collective of rich countries conspiring here to really enforce their dominance on the rest of the world through poverty and war. That's what we've heard from protesters over the last few days. Now, the cost of facilitating this protest, if you can call it facilitation, well, it's expected to total more than 200 million euros. We've seen police horses, hundreds of police vans, and miles of police fences, as well as those tens of thousands of heavily armoured police officers.
ich kann euch nur raten.
Harry Fear, thank you very much indeed. It's certainly very loud. People are making their voices heard, their passions obviously high. Harry Fear, thank you. We'll be speaking to you a bit later on.
Europa überall